Hi, and thank you for watching this. My name is Kyama Mugambi. I study and teach urban Christianity in Africa, and I'm the author of A Spirit of Revitalization, Urban Pentecostalism in Kenya. 2 facts. As Africans, we like to tell stories. 2, Africa has more Christians than any other continent in the world. And so this book tells a story about an expression of this African Christianity. You see, Africa has more Christians than North America and Asia put together. There are 100 million more Christians in Africa than there are in Europe. And so this is a book about this Christianity. And so if you're interested in learning more, you're curious about that shift, or if you just study Africa or study religion in Africa, this is a book that you might find useful. I tell a story of Pentecostal charismatic expressions in Kenya to bring out a Christianity that is very rooted in its social context, rooted in its cultural context, a Christianity that is very much a part of our identity, very much a part of my identity.
Religious life is important. Religious life is important. Deliverance Church in this area, the Deliverance Church is one of the MPCCs, the newer Pentecostal charismatic churches. There's a full gospel church of Kenya in Imara Daima, another of the older Pentecostal churches. And so religious life, even as the population grows, as people build more so that we can have more people living in the urban centers, the religious life continues to morph, to change, to grow, to develop in so many different ways. And so you have churches that are more established, but then you have churches like these ones, Shacks, Overcomer Truth Church, and right next to it you have the Eagle Rise Christian Church, and again, right next to it you have New Hope Church, as and that is who we are. That's what we are about. And these churches speak into the life and speak into the needs of we Africans who are coming to terms with our realities, who we are, redefining our identity in urban centers. And the church, again, just is a very important part of that. Over on my right, we have the cathedral, and not quite a cathedral, but a church that is in a tent, and so religious life is a very important part of who we are as a people.
In this book, I talk about individual churches, I talk about their leaders, I try to show some of the rich commonalities as well as the diversity amongst the different generations of Kenya's Christian communities. And so in reading the book, you're going to learn about the processes of innovation, of curation, revision, that are part of conversion and translation in Christian history. Within the stories in the book, I talk about a whole range of themes. I talk about things that you might have heard about in relation to Pentecostalism in Africa. Things like worship, expression, leadership, theology. But I also address things that are less talked about in relation to Pentecostalism in Africa. Things like church structures, corporate vision, discipleship, and theological education. And in all of these, I'm trying to show how Kenyan Pentecostal movements have imagined and reimagined and continue to reimagine Christianity through their approaches to orality, to kinship, and to integrated spirituality. Now, when you look at this Christianity, it's a vibrant Christianity. It is a joyful Christianity. It's prayerful. It is upbeat. It is fervent. But it's also a Christianity with its downsides. It's a Christianity with some leaders who are greedy, some who are manipulative, some of the churches are even heretical. But it is a diverse Christianity which requires a nuanced perspective. And so in the book, I explore how this Christianity, stubbornly tries to offer hope, tries to offer security in a very volatile, context that we find on the continent. And ask the question, is this Christianity simply an imitation of foreign church models, or is there more to it? Is there something that's more indigenous about it? This book forms a part of a growing number of studies that are taking an emic scholarly look from within the movement. Having grown up in the context, speaking the languages, singing the songs, having served as a layperson, and then as a pastor for decades, and now a researcher and a scholar, I try to, I try to put this thing together to give you as thorough an understanding of this Christianity as I could in one volume. I'm convinced that this is a perspective that needs to be given space. It's a perspective that needs to be put in writing to contribute to the discourse.
This book by Kyama Mugambi on urban Pentecostalism in Kenya describes the enthusiastic manifestation of urban-based revitalization of Christianity in Africa, transnational, transcultural, and also trans-religious. The book is worth reading, both for interest and for scholarly advancement. More of such research and publication is essential and urgent. The youth are the majority in charismatic and Pentecostal churches in Africa, where the continental median age in 2020 is 19. Hopefully, this book will inspire other African scholars of the younger generation to conduct more research on these new trends in African Christianity. The 21st century in Africa has begun with a new wave of Christianization, identified mainly with Pentecostal and charismatic expressions, especially in urban centers. Characteristic of these churches is their dynamism and youthfulness. African churches resulting from colonial missionary outreach were given labels of the sponsor denominations: Adventist, Anglican, Baptist, Catholic, Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian, Reformed, Salvation Army, and such others. In contrast, the category of churches described in this book has catchy names resonating with youthful idioms. This book describes the distinct Kenyan African aspects of this urban Pentecostalism, quite apart from the Azusa revivalism.
Dr. Kyama's new book, A Spirit of Revitalization, is an exciting new addition to our libraries. As many of you know, the institutions in Africa, the tertiary institutions in Africa, struggle with a lack of resources. Access is often limited as well as availability. Dr. Kyama provides us with a contextual resource that shows us the history of the Pentecostal church in Africa, and now it has continued to grow and to thrive. The new expression that has come with it is one that is of much value as we begin to consider African Christianity in the face of global Christianity. As we all know, right now, there are more Christians in Africa than anywhere else in the world. And many of these movements that are growing are the Pentecostal movements. And so through this exciting new resource, we are given a glimpse into what this Pentecostal movement is adding to ecclesiology. It shows clearly how our contextual situatedness influences our ecclesiology, how faith and our Christianity must be functional, and how the Holy Spirit must be given center place. I would use this textbook without reservation in my classrooms because it is a resource that helps to challenge the notion of what an African Christian ought to look like. The question, what does it mean to be Christian and what does it mean to be African, is one that many of us struggle with. And this resource provides us with the material that we need to redefine our African Christianity and it is one that our students will find useful and that the students will be able to use within their ministry context as well.
This book is laid out in 3 sections. The first is a historical kind of contextual background that we give to the book. The second section looks at specific aspects of what I would call synthesis and creative adaptations in this Christianity. And then the third section takes a look at a couple of case studies of churches and then how these churches engage with concepts that we do not often relate with African Pentecostal churches. So in the first section, after the introduction, we look at how early African initiatives in Christianity, or AICs as they're sometimes called, emerged from historic mission Christianity. And in these initiatives in East Africa commonly called Spirit Roho churches, and we look at how important they were as a stepping stone to what we now have today. In the second chapter, we look at the shift from monocultural expressions of Christianity to cosmopolitan, multi-ethnic movements. And I give a fresh take on 2 important movements: East African Revival and student movements, and look at how they contribute to Christianity in Kenya today. In the third chapter, we now get into the newer Pentecostal charismatic churches, or NPCCs, and I give the political background, the economic background, the social context from which these communities emerged. Still in the first section, in the fourth chapter, I bring the reader now to the 21st century and talk about an emerging type of Pentecostal charismatic church. These churches are grouped together and were, Donald Miller and Tetsunoya Mamori called them progressive Pentecostal churches. And we look at how these in the Kenyan context reimagined Christianity as an active player in transformation of society, a society that is in turmoil. So after that section, in the next section, we look at specific aspects of synthesis and creative adaptations. In the fifth chapter, I take the concept of discipleship. And I ask, how has this changed in the history of Pentecostalism in Kenya? And inside here, we look in and we see how contextual this process really is. And I talk about some of the innovations that we see in discipleship today. Then in the sixth chapter, I take something else and I examine how leaders are formed in Kenyan Pentecostalism. And I raise questions about, what's the role of theological education in the formation of these leaders? And I look at the history and I see what institutions did or didn't do to raise leaders for movements in Kenya. And then I also tell stories of what churches are doing today to form their leaders or to raise up their leaders. In the third section, we take a couple of case studies. In the first case study that I look at is Christ is the Answer Ministry. We look at its history. We explore how Christ is the Answer Ministry, or CITAM as it is sometimes called, how it navigates the tension between Pentecostal spontaneity, which we all are very familiar with, but also the need for organizational structure. And in chapter 8, we look at Nairobi Chapel. And we use this as a case study to research the role of charismatic vision casting in the shaping of leaders in modern African Pentecostal movements. And I talk about the African primal concept of time and see how the different movements up to today have engaged or related with that concept of time.
Hi. I'm David Aycock, and I serve as the Interim Director at Baylor University Press. Baylor University Press's Studies in World Christianity series represents a major effort to provide fresh exposure to worldwide expressions of Christianity and their histories, especially emphasizing indigenous efforts in localizing the faith. With both foreign and indigenous scholars and authors represented in the series, Studies in World Christianity has now explored Latin America, Africa, Eastern Europe, and Asia. Series editor Joel Carpenter, formerly of the Nagel Institute at Calvin University, has ably pursued excellence both in the scholarship he has brought to the series as well as the relationships he has formed with the series authors. Baylor University Press is committed to bringing voices far and wide into the academic conversations on the global church, and Kyama Mugambi's new book, A Spirit of Revitalization, Urban Pentecostalism in Kenya, aligns with that mission. As a native Kenyan, Mugambi utilizes his experiences and access to on-the-ground resources to provide an unprecedented and thorough account of African Pentecostalism. We at Baylor University Press are proud of what Mugambi has accomplished in this volume, and we believe the book will be of utmost importance to those who seek a better understanding of Christianity's lively history across Central Africa.
What I found to be most exciting about this book was that it's really two books in one, both a frontline history of the Pentecostal and charismatic movement as it arose in Kenya, and really a fresh account. And then it's an in-depth study of contemporary charismatic megachurch Christianity in Greater Nairobi. So two books for the price of one. I think it's a marvelous study. What really impressed me when I first saw the work was that the material was absolutely fresh, and it was drawn on archival sources. It was drawn on what historians call gray material, sort of ephemeral pamphlets and circulars, and thought this man has really done his homework. This will be a study of Pentecostal Christianity in Kenya like no one has done thus far. So I was very happy about that. And it's a great fit for the Baylor series. You know, we, as of this fall, we now have 12 books in the series. And each one of these is a fresh account of the rise of Christian movements in places around the world. So we have books that look at India and China and Latin America, as well as Africa, and a book about Eastern Europe, too, about the rise of the Baptists in the Republic of Georgia. So it's a marvelous series. It's a way to get beyond the generalizations about world Christianity and to see live Christian movements on the ground, changing people's lives and being a blessing to their nations. So, you know, we're just very happy to include this book in the series, now running a dozen. We have a couple of other new books out this fall. It's a great year for us. The first year we've done 3. One's on the rise of Christianity in Ghana in the 19th century, and how Ghanaians heard the gospel from the German missionaries, and how they understood the gospel, and the delightful differences between how it was received and how it was taken up. So. And the other book we have is on a Chinese evangelist from the early 20th century, and his name is John Song. And he was an electrifying speaker, huge mass audiences in all the major cities of China and then throughout Southeast Asia as well. He was known as the Billy Sunday, who was the famous American evangelist, the Billy Sunday of China. But the author of that book says, look, you cannot understand contemporary urban revivalist Christianity in China without knowing about its roots in this absolutely intriguing and in some cases alarming evangelist, John Song. So those are the kinds of titles we have in this series. And for sure, this book on Kenyan Pentecostalism is going to hold its own. We're so happy to have it. I think it's an opportunity for an up-and-coming scholar from East Africa to teach those of us in the Northern Hemisphere who ought to care about these things. And I just hope that it sees widespread interest in circulation.
First of all, let me say a huge congratulations and thank you to my friend, Dr. Kyama Mugambi, for his new book, A Spirit of Revitalization, that explores urban Pentecostalism in Kenya. I do believe that what he says in the book, in exploring urban Pentecostalism in Kenya, is applicable to many other urban contexts in the continent of Africa. It's not too different from what you find in Lilongwe, in Johannesburg, in in Accra, in Lagos, and many other parts of the continent. So thank you for making that contribution. I love the book cover, seeing Oscar Murillo and others on the front of a book cover like that, giving us something to be proud about as Africans. I love the arguments that you're making. I love the proposals that you're putting forward. I love the fact that this is an African book written by an African. It's part of us Africans really rising up to own our stories, to be able to tell our stories the way we want them to be taught. So thank you so much for doing that. This is a book that really should be required reading for most of our students of African Christianity, African theology. You need to read materials like this to understand what's happening in the continent, not just when you study African Christianity, but also when you study Christianity as a whole. It is my senior colleague at Liverpool Hope University, Professor Andrew Walls, who says if anybody wants to learn anything about Christianity today, he has to learn, or she has to learn, about Africa. And this book becomes a great resource in helping us all, Africans and otherwise, learn about what God is doing in the continent of Africa. It's a great addition to many libraries. It's a great addition to many dissertations and theses that will explore African Christianity. It has that potential to speak new life, new energy, bring new knowledge to the world about African Christianity. So thank you, Kyama. I highly recommend this book to everybody interested in African Christianity, to everybody interested in the study of Christianity as a whole, and to everybody interested in anything to do with Africa. You need to understand African Christianity, you need to understand religion in the continent to understand Africa. So this is a book that has to be read by many people. Thank you, Kyama, for doing this. I really appreciate you taking time to write this book. Thank you.
There are many ways in which research portrays Christianity in Africa. Some of the research is aloof, some of it is skeptical, some of it is disdainful. And some research looks at this Christianity and asks the question, what is this Christianity? Others will ask the question, what's wrong with this Christianity? This book looks at the opportunities, looks at the perils, it looks at the way this Christianity expresses itself, it looks at the dangers, it looks at the successes, and asks what is an us often enough? And that is, what is the history behind this Christianity? How did this Christianity get to where it is now? And this research also asks, why is this Christianity the way it is? The book uses terms and categories that not only resonate with Africans, but are terms that can push the discourse a little further than has been pushed before. It uses the lens of kinship or orality or integrated spirituality and brings those in dialogue with what is under study. And to write this book, to put it together, I used a historical methodology, and you're going to find in the book a fair amount of historical background. You're going to find a fair amount of description. There is some description. There is analysis, and the data is taken from a range of primary and secondary sources in English, Swahili, Kikuyu languages, which I am proficient. And dozens of in-depth interviews with individuals who are familiar with these movements and themselves have been involved in the movements. I drew from my experience within the context. I drew from participant observation, structured and unstructured, of church services, prayer meetings, reports that have been that are available, constitutions, historical documents, ephemera, audio, video recordings of local music, hymnals, sermons, interviews, testimonies, and in a number of local languages to put together the elements of this book.
The other thing I really like about this book is it tells a much more full and deeply dimensioned story than previous books on Kenyan Pentecostalism. I really like that this book, in effect, tells a fuller and more truthful story.
So allow me to read you some excerpts from this book. Through stories of people and their movement, it explores the ways in which translation is a dynamic act of revision, where one phase is never good enough, and as social life and language change, it must change as well. Newer Pentecostal charismatic church theology, or NPCC theology, also stresses an empowering aspect of the gospel. Healing and deliverance provide a channel for the individual to call out, come to terms with, and address obstacles to their own advancement. This aspect of empowerment is a source of hope within a challenging economic and social context. Salvation is therefore holistic and experiential in its meaning. Flowing out of this all-encompassing approach is the creation of plausibility structures that allow the Christian in Africa to anticipate good health, success, and prosperity in life as a result of their faith. The names of the churches bear testimony of their leaders' desire to be such agents of hope. Names such as Eagle Rise, Overcomers Truth Church, and New Hope Church are an attempt to make their churches very identity about this hope. This book's posture rejects the use of historic missionary Christianity or 20th century evangelical or fundamentalist rubrics as the primary reference points for assessment. Rather, we will consider the importance of African Pentecostalism as a legitimate expression that must be assessed in its own terms. NPCCs were, at least in part, a response to the failure of some sections of the historic mission denominations to address the needs of a dynamic, young, increasingly urban population. The churches also provided an avenue for Christian Union members who graduated from college to maintain vibrant worship and for members to freely express their leadership gifts. As the influence of the East African revival and the Spirit Roho churches waned from its peak in the 20th century, NPCCs filled the gap and in so doing retained, albeit in a different way, the orality, holistic spirituality, and vibrant expression evident in each of these earlier renewal movements. The transition of Kenya's political and economic life from the post-independence regime to a larger economy with more democratic space created a new context that called for a different Pentecostal response. Daniel Arap Moi's Kenya came with its share of political and economic turmoil. The quest to open the democratic space, along with the broadening of the urban middle class in the 1990s, prepared for the growth of a new kind of Pentecostal Christianity found in the emerging PPCs, or Progressive Pentecostal churches. These churches introduced a theology ripe for social, economic, and political engagement as an expression of the holistic African Christian experience. To PPCs, such engagement was as important as prayer and deliverance in the Christian faith.
Hongera sana Kyama Mugambi on the publication of A Spirit of Revitalization. The world is changing much faster than we have ability to document, synthesize, and interpret everything that is going on, no less on the Christian scene. A lot of new history is being made every single day. The contemporary Christian story in Africa has often been told by outsiders who are well-intentioned but have limited perspectives. This is why I appreciate this insider telling of important stories, the naming of places, churches, and organizations that have defined the unique trajectory of the Christian narrative. In Kenya, I invite readers of Kyama's work to a fresh imagination and to ask new questions about the continuing long-term trajectory of Christianity in Africa. British missionary historian Andrew Walls, Ghanaian scholar Kwame Bediako, Gambian scholar Lamin Sane, and Nigerian scholar Ogbu Kalu, all in their own words, or through their phenomenological readings of this phase of Christian transmission in Africa, have each pointed out that the Christian faith in Africa is not merely an extension of Western Christianity. It is Christianity in a new phase of historical transmission. Think about that for a minute. What is happening in our midst is Christianity in a new phase of historical transmission. So as you read Kyama's telling of this dimension of the story, through the set of churches he chooses to tell the story, consider this not as a triumphalistic narrative, but rather as the opportunity to probe deeper. And therefore, that this reflection should generate new dimensions for theological education, for social action, and even for ecclesiological structural direction. Congratulations again.
The growth of Pentecostalism in Kenya is a study in the tension between the drive to indigenize expressions of Christianity and the desire to appreciate the otherworldly dimension of the faith. This book demonstrates how successive generations of Christians uniquely navigated this tension. Each iteration of the Christian faith harnessed its contextual, religious, social, and cultural heritage as choice source material. Each era appropriated ideas and practices from its historical and cultural context. Churches incorporated inventions produced when their leaders' imagination, shaped by their internalized faith, confronted the inadequacies of previous movements. Creating new expressions of Christianity was both a creative process and a curation of existing material. This new Christianity rearranged the essentials of the faith presented by historic missionary efforts. In so doing, it gave prominence to those features that resonated with the immediate African cultural and historical context, presenting to their audience a faith articulated in their language and metaphor. To these innovators, the perceived inadequacies of previous expressions became opportunities for ingenuity.
So yes, it's a pleasure for me to be able to join in this celebration of this book launch. I've known Dr. Mugambi for many years as a colleague, as a friend, a former student, and I'm thrilled with this occasion and congratulate him on this achievement, particularly because it addresses an important topic, the explosive impact of Pentecostalism in Kenya. You know, for many, Pentecostalism in Africa is an unwelcome American import of televangelist Christianity. Too many Kenyans watching too much American Pentecostal TV. That's on the one hand, but on the other, critics have called it an escapist super spirituality that cares very little about the pressing economic, social, and political needs of the continent in general and of Kenya in particular. But what Dr. Mugambi has done, he's moved the narrative about African Pentecostalism beyond what I think are very incomplete storylines by giving us a picture of lived Pentecostalism. These are actual churches, actual leaders, actual congregations living out their Pentecostalism in the rough and tumble of daily life, but giving that picture of lived Pentecostalism to us in a key part of Africa today. So those who care about African Christianity and its future and wanting to get the full picture of what God is doing would do well to read this book. Readers will come away, as I have done, with an understanding of how the winds of the Spirit are blowing, and an understanding also of that is rich, learned, wise, nuanced, and I think deeply grounded in the author's own experience. So again, I congratulate you, Dr. Mugambi, and I'm thrilled to be a part of today's event.
And so, A Spirit of Revitalization, Urban Pentecostalism in Kenya, is a story about a remarkable, prolific Christianity that needs to be better comprehended. In writing this book, my commitment to you as the reader was and still remains to help you better understand this Christianity. Now, I'm grateful to all those who are part of the writing and the publishing of this book. There's a village of scholars and colleagues, extended family and close family, our children, my wife, who have been a part of this. My sincere thanks goes to all of them. You can get this book from the links below this video. But thank you once again for joining me in this. Please share this link with others who you know need to hear this. Thank you. Asante na Mungu awabariki.
Moyo wangu utainuka na kukusifu Baba. Akili yangu imeamua mimi ni wako Baba.